Hi everyone, welcome to the Mechs and Miniatures podcast, episode 8. The title of this episode is Something Something. I'm João Costa, also known as Polygon Masterworks, and I'm here
With Rick Graham from Revelations and Revelation Skirmish.
and we're both laughing in the before recording about about stuff. And I'm sure you appreciated the name I gave this little episode, right, Rick?
Well, yeah, because as we were discussing prior to this, and we were realizing um, the differences in uh, mental processes for this, and I'm obviously much more rigid, which is I guess more of a character trait for me. But
Yeah, like we need the main subject for this episode, and I'm like just click record, which is an interesting contrast.
yeah,
Um,
well, yeah.
yeah, and it's up to you, the listeners, if you like a more laid back, like fluid, organic style, or if you want us to stick with like more like set well defined topics and just keep it at that. We've gone into rants in previous episodes, like the like the Batman is dead in a cave, in a time traveling cave somewhere. The rant that lasted like 45 minutes, but but again, just leave comments and tell us what you think on Discord or something like that, and we're listening, man. We're listening, everyone. We do have ears. So what are you talking about? What are you working on lately with Revelations? What's going on?
So we have wow, how many? I'm thinking of all the different models that we have in development, and we're moving forward with testing. It's like six, quite a few, that we're testing to hopefully be released semi soon for some of them, and some of the others are for the new faction. That then has to do through play testing and through other hoops. Um, so that's keeping me fairly busy. My free time, my free business time is being spent over there, and I'm still trying to finish up the some other promotional art. There's so much stuff that it's very easy to get distracted, and you realize, oh, when you turn around, oh wait, that was 2 weeks ago the last time I touched that thing, and I need to fix it or finish it and get it rolled out. So it's very it's easy to misplace something um, in the midst of all the other conversations and promotions and everything else going on. So there's a lot of stuff. There's a couple of other things that I'm pretty close to being able to announce some ancillary products. So that's pretty cool. And then um, I am messing with. This is just very recent, so I don't really know 100% if it's going to go anywhere, but it's something to still talk about. That I am messing with a potential second game with that is Revelations themed. So
Right.
I'm I printed out a couple of templates to start toying with very very lightly, and it's taken me back to like the very beginning, like when I did skirmish, and how like you have to decide on all of these things. Like you don't realize when you're first sitting down to make a game, you're not thinking of everything. You can only think of maybe what you have inspiration for, whatever is motivating you. And then when you start saying, okay, well, what is the board going to look? What is the table, the mat, the battlefield going to look like? And oh, right, we have to. And if you're doing, it's always fun, but it's always very interesting. And I think it'll probably weave in a little bit to some of our discussion topics. So I'll wait till then. I don't want to take forever talking about me.
No, but do you find it as difficult as when you were creating Skirmish? Like because it's a Revelations associated game, right? So I imagine it has some things we in common with Skirmish.
Um, Yes, in the sense that it's part of the universe, but no, because it's a space game. So it's
Okay,
yeah. So what I've always wanted to do was to release what I call the war system,
right.
which will be where you have skirmish, you have maybe a larger scale ground battle game, and then you also have a space game, and that eventually the war system would be a way for like all of those to work together in a campaign system, and you could choose as players to use certain component. Maybe you didn't want to play the space battles, you have zero interest, and then okay, fine. So if you're following a campaign track, okay, well you guys win, you guys land on the planet, or, whatever.
Yeah.
To kind of move the campaign along, you just skip. Or there might be some that are designed no space combat, just large scale ground battles. Sure.
Or you
So
get blown up in orbit and guys, we brought these 50 miniatures, but you got blown up, so the game is over.
so the I was kind of thinking like I had gotten an idea the other day for a potential game mechanic, and I was like, well, it won't work in skirmish. There's no point. I'm not bringing it into skirmish. It would have to change too much.
Right.
So I started thinking, well, why don't I make another game then? I'm like, well, wait. I've tried that. Don't get distracted with a whole new brand, a whole new universe, a whole new everything because it's just I don't have enough time right now.
Yeah.
But I was like, well, why don't I use it for growing the war system out? Why am I even considering jumping to another brand when I could just add another branch to the tree, so to speak? Um,
It would have to
so
make sense, basically.
yeah, well, and then at least it's still yeah, it's another type of game. It would be a space warfare,
Yeah.
but that still works with Revelations. I'm not losing, or I'm not having to double the amount of creative work because it's still in the same
Yeah,
universe.
yeah, of course. Like me proposing to you yesterday to let's both license the Homeworld IP and do a space strategy like tabletop game, and you're like, "What's Homeworld?" That was fun, fun, and that was a short proposal.
I didn't even know totally if you were serious. I was like, well, I don't even know what it is, so I can't really say yes.
Well, like I told you, I mean, you have instant brand recognition. You have like a really defined visual style, and you're just basically copying the visual style of the games. And you have like really deep sci-fi lore that is very interesting. Homeworld is super cool, and I think in this age where X-Wing and Armada and those games brought a lot of people into the space side of tabletop gaming, I actually think it could be like a good seller, and it's a known IP. You know that's the thing that makes that would um, compensate that fact that we would be like taking like a side step into making a second game. The big draw would be that it's a known IP, so you could get more eyes on the game instead of creating something from scratch. But again, it's hard to design a homeworld game with someone that doesn't know what homeworld is.
Well, it's kind of like designing the Star Wars sequels and not watching Star Wars.
Right, and not having plan for a trilogy, and not watching the previous movies, and disregarding what happened in the previous movie. If my first name was Ryan and my last name was Johnson, stuff like that.
It's a
Stuff
lot
like
like that.
Yeah, it's a lot like that. Obviously, we don't own the Homeworld IP. No one sue us, please. We would obviously, if that was the plan, we would try to license the IP, obviously. But yeah, that plan died. Rip Homeworld tabletop game 2222.
You also didn't know that I was trying to do a space game. Like
Yeah, I didn't.
as you're talking about it, like I don't care about Homeworld.
It was totally random. It was because I think it was Josh started talking about space games in the Discord or something like that, and we started like talking about that stuff. And Iron Raptor showed a few spaceship models. I think it was because of that, and we started talking about space strategy games. Um, And you know, touching on the conversation we had the other day, that X-wing and Armada style, all that stuff is patented, right? It actually belongs to Fantasy Flight or Asmodee or whatever they call themselves this week.
Well, well, as far as the game goes, we were the initial conversation had begun because we were discussing click spaces,
Oh right, yeah,
and then the click spaces, and then realizing what level of, and none of us are that I'm aware of, none of us in the community that are having this conversation are lawyers, especially patent lawyers specifically.
yeah.
But the clicks base idea is patented pretty, it appears to be pretty tight in the US. So it looks like it would be really difficult to come up with anything that has stats directly on the base of the miniature, short of like angles for firing arcs and names.
Pretty
It
tight
doesn't.
is an understatement.
Yeah,
That thing is like a phone book or an encyclopedia, and
yeah.
I
It's
realize,
pretty nuts.
yeah, and a phone book for everyone that is listening that doesn't know what a phone book is. It's a large book that contains phone numbers from everyone in your area. So that okay, that's a phone book. It's a historical relic. You can search for it on Google. But it's interesting that you brought the our conversation about the click spaces and MechWarrior Dark Age up, because one of the biggest differences I found playing that game, in addition to the click spaces having all the stats on the base, and thus you didn't require any outside elements to play the game, was the fact that they didn't use hexes, which was basically the thing that I was most used to playing with. The game was like just you had like the metric tape, the ruler, and you didn't have hexes, and you had completely free form terrain and 3D terrain. It was all like really dynamic. I found it really dynamic. Of course, on the other side, you have the people that defend hex playing or grid based playing to the max, and saying that it simplifies a lot of aspects like the firing arcs in Battletech hexagons or Renegade Legion hexagons, which was another space game. Um, but I keep going back to having 3D terrain and no grid as having maximum freedom, as well as the aesthetics, because I'm a very visual person, so I like to have that look at the gaming table and it looks all nice. It doesn't have like markings everywhere, that are there to make me go this place or that place. I can just do anything I want. Do you have a preference?
Well, normally, normally I would probably lean more automatically towards a nice 3D terrain setup.
Yeah.
It obviously depends on the game. So if I'm playing a board game like Twilight Imperium, that's not going to work.
Oh, right,
You
right.
you need a grid system. If you're playing, depending on what sort of other games, like they all have their own flair. But I would say that visually, the 3D terrain looks a lot better now. Um, Interesting enough, as I say this, the and none of this is locked down 100% yet. But if I were to move forward with the space game idea, it would be actually using a hex grid system. And the
Yeah.
reason that I decided of doing that is because like I've now I am not an experienced Star Wars Armada player, but I have played it once all the way through. And I've talked about it with people several times. I loathe the idea as a player of my ships leaving the battlefield. I cannot stand that idea as a player that I may have goofed up and I steered them too much to the left and I just waved goodbye. I'll see you later. That was a bunch of points that I just accidentally drove off the board.
What, that
So,
happens?
yeah, that's one of the things of it.
Why? Because of the like the pre-calculated movement, templates or whatever it is it
Yeah,
uses.
because of the way that the movement template, the movement tool works,
Yeah.
that and the size of your ship as you move through the different segments, if you're not careful, you could just disappear. And I'm like, that sucks. I don't like that. And I also don't like how when you're playing, Star Wars is very guilty of being in space, but feeling like it's a World War II battleship
Yeah.
but fight. And I know that that's part of the flair of Star Wars, so I'm not crapping on Star Wars, but it doesn't really make sense that all ships are oriented the same way. All ships are kind of like on the same plane for the most part. Um, and they're all really close where you could bump into each other. Well, another thing, as I understand it in Armada, is that you have to be careful as you're navigating the field that you don't bump into each other. I'm like, well, that doesn't make any freaking sense because you should not be fighting so close that you could bump. You should be so far away, like because the weapons have such long ranges in space that you should, even if you're close, you're not close. You know. So I decided that if I did a grid system, yes, visually it may not look as interesting, but it will be more, I'm hoping, entertaining that you can have ships in the same hex because the hexes are going to be larger. That you could have ships in the same hex and they're not touching because they could still be passing over each other, but they could be, miles apart even though they're passing as far as what the game board is showing.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
That's because it's hard to translate the 3D spatial
yes,
nature of obviously
right.
of space in the tabletop game.
So that's why I'm thinking if you do a grid system that's more abstract,
Hmm.
then you're not being committed to we're playing on this super sexy neoprene mat, but we bump into each other all the time. So it's trying to decide which way I wanted to go. I like the idea I'm kind of going with first. Because with Revelation Skirmish, that's all about like sexy 3D terrain because that
Yeah,
is more realistic. But then with space, you have to not have so much of the visual focus to make it more realistic. You have to do a different sort of approach because of the weirdness of space compared to our normal thinking of, you know, uh, things being so far apart.
yeah. And with Blackstar, I'm also going into the 3D terrain thing because that's really what I enjoy. It looks much cooler, and I want the freedom of playing without hexes, right? But there's an issue there where you come up with auxiliary stuff for your game, right? It can be like stickers, mugs, t-shirts, whatever it is. In terms of terrain, I'm actually designing and will start releasing soon the actual scenery, the 3D scenery and the 3D terrain, so that
Mm-hmm.
people can print that is Blackstar themed. But of course, that is something that maybe people would prefer to just use what they already have from, for example, from Warhammer 40k or another game that sells terrain or third party suppliers of terrain, or they would prefer that I dedicate all my time to making the mechs and the game rules. But I find it a way to also flesh out the universe. But I do end up basically having sort of two product lines, or because on one hand I'm doing a game with mechs, and on the other hand I'm doing like 3D terrain that you can use for Blackstar, but you can also use for other games. So it ends up being like a mix and dividing of resources. But I do enjoy it. That's obviously that's why I'm doing it. It helps me flesh out the universe. I've been thinking, talking to artists and talking about the artwork, the key art, the concepts that we are doing, and when the subject comes up, oh, how is the background, how is the look of the civilization, how is this type of building, that sort of stuff. If I have already developed that in actual 3D for the game, it will be much easier to tell them, here, this is how defensive emplacements should look, because they already exist, stuff like that. But it does come into my mind like this dividing of resources. I'm doing supplemental stuff outside of what the main game is supposed to be. And I know you've thought about doing like your own Revelations team terrain, right?
Oh yeah, and pursuing some of that here and there as I can, and it's the the benefit of having Revelations buildings and such would be that there's no visual comparison to certain things. I mean, there's some amazing modelers out there selling terrain, but then they're not selling it in my scale.
Right.
Almost nobody is. So it would be stuff that is themed for that scale, themed for that universe, and then I think it just pulls people in differently to be able to recreate a Republic city, core Republic, or to, some manufacturing facility on the planet Benson, just random stuff like that. I think is more engaging for the players.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you see a lot of that stuff, terrain packs and scenery packs and all that, on Kickstarter, on crowdfunding. But then most of them are themed either for Star Wars Legion or for Warhammer 40k. A lot of that
Yeah,
stuff on
mostly.
Kickstarter, right?
Well, and then that's also assuming that the terrain was designed to be optimized for FDM printing or even resin.
Yeah,
And that was a scandal that happened. At least only one campaign I'm aware of. I'm sure it happens fairly often where people model something and then say, well, it looks really good on my computer. Yes, but it doesn't mean that it'll translate very well for the bulk of players. And you have to consider that. And that's part of the modeling process too. Sometimes I bring up to some of the modelers, not to knock them, but to be like, that part looks really cool, but I don't know if the majority of people will be able to optimize it and make sure that it prints the way that you've designed it. So I think we need to make it a little bit simpler
yeah,
so that it's not as busy, so that, because I don't try to have models designed for 8K printers. I don't even have an 8K, but just for example, I don't go for whatever is the top available. I have to consider that people may have a 3-year-old Anycubic Photon and they're still going to buy my files. So I should try to make sure that the models more than likely can be successful on their older printers as well as on my 4K printers, you know, and not abandoning people with old tech being like, well, sorry, man, you need to update or get out of here. Like, no, that's, you have to kind of bring them along
yeah. It's
and be
like
mindful of them.
I'm gonna shoot a video clip. And it's gonna be in 8K, and if you don't have an 8K TV or monitor, screw you. It's your loss. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the wrong mentality. Um, but I know what you mean about that Kickstarter thing. Maybe it's because I've been doing this. I've been doing these 3D printing models, and I'm a 3D artist. I looked at that. I understand a lot of consumers or players don't look at that stuff, and they don't understand, like the exact the like the practicalities of 3D modeling and the products. But sometimes you look at some campaigns and you can really see, yeah, this is never gonna work out. And then, but people back it in droves, and then are surprised it doesn't isn't released, or the product is bad or something like that. And I'm like, it was so obvious. But maybe it's just me. The, and I'm not just talking about, obviously, like scene 3D model scenery packs or buildings or stuff like that. Some campaigns where here is an entire army game, and I'm gonna have 200 units, and I'm gonna have this ready in 6 months, and I'm offering it for like a third of what Games Workshop charges or something like that. And I'm like, that's not gonna work. That's clearly not gonna work. You're probably never gonna ship anything, or you're gonna take 3 years, or you're gonna run out of money, or a multitude of reasons. And some things are really easy to see.
Well, and you also have the experience, and when you're just and that is not a negative, but if you're only a player, or if you're a newer player to miniature gaming, you won't see things a certain way. And then if you're new to 3D printing, you might be able to say, wow, those models are really cool. I've seen a lot of models that aren't as cool as these. All right, these are awesome. But if you're newer to printing, then you don't see issues really quick. And I've been part of the, we've been modeling now for we're like a month or two away from 3 years. So I am now more instinctively picking up on things in the modeling process, saying I don't, without even having to put it in my slicer and test it, I can look at certain things and be like, that's not going to be fun to print. We need to change the way that this is going. But I have 3 years of experience of overseeing modeling being done and doing my own tests to be able to look at that and immediately be like, that piece is way too skinny. It's not going to work. We need to change it.
Yeah.
You know, and as a player only, you may not, because if you only have experience from certain modelers who do really good, and then you switch to somebody new, somebody's new product, you won't necessarily pick up immediately on the negatives because the other guys were so good at their job that you didn't know to look for certain things because they already took care of it for you.
Yeah.
You know, they made a quality product.
And I see that all the time, experimenting. I've supported different artists, different crowdfunding campaigns, also getting models, going to a site like Cults and getting models for free or sometimes paid. And then you download them, and there's a whole world out there of people that some people really know how to prepare the files, some people really don't, and everything in between, models that aren't really exactly closed. I mean, they still print. That's the thing, and then most people don't really understand. Oh, looking at the model, why is this model more expensive than that one? It, I got that one and it printed just fine. Well, maybe you got lucky, or it printed fine in that scale, but if I up the scale, then holes would start to appear and resin would start to become stuck inside and not cure correctly, and then the model breaks. There's an entire world, and then there's also FDM printing, obviously, which is slightly different from resin printing. And then the multi parts, if it's just a single part, if it's something that has like a large base, like a building, or if it's something that is small and has like obviously human shaped, like a mech, you know, it's an entire world. I've been having people ask me to if my files are pre-supported, and I've had discussions about this with people, and the conclusion we all reached was like there's way too many printer models now, way too many resin types, several different slicers, and people end up just using their own settings anyway. Even maybe at the start they used something pre-supported, and obviously everyone has to start somewhere, but once you get some experience with the machine, you just use your own settings. So it wasn't really justifying the cost, because I wasn't dealing with the pre-supporting. I was consulting with services that do that, and it was too expensive to do for the benefit that it gave me. For Blackstar, I will pre have some things pre-supported or some things pre-prepared by me. Like, since it's a bigger scale, it's 25 millimeter. I will be hollowing out models when it's like a model prepared for resin printing. I will put sink holes in them so the resin flows correctly, stuff like that. So that obviously that is more technical work that I'm not gonna uh, pass along to consumers or to players that don't have any clue about that stuff, and I'm not gonna make them print like this huge mech torso fully solid in resin, and waste 6 times as much resin, um, but the Kickstarter thing is interesting, because sometimes you really see when people overpromise, or they underfund it. Especially when, oh, this is really cheap, I'm gonna back this. Yeah, it's cheap for a reason, and they're gonna run out of money. They haven't considered
Yeah,
taxes, or the fee that Kickstart collects, and banking fees and all that stuff.
right. And Kickstarter is a fantastic platform, but it does have like lots of things to consider, and it's difficult because I backed a project the same time that I was doing my initial Kickstarters for Revelations Skirmish, and that game has still not come out. The updates are getting less and less frequent, and it's looking like they have super overstretched themselves. And I don't know if that game's ever going to happen. I'm
Right.
starting to see people commenting saying, what are you, if this isn't happening, can you just let us know? That's the frustration that the community around them has gotten to. So I am by nature, I am not an early adopter. When you look at like the consumer types, I am not the first person in line to buy the brand new thing that's never been tested. It's just not, I don't like that. Um, it now like for example like the Halo games.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I love Halo. I have a lot of experience with Halo. I want to play Halo. But if some new video game comes out from this game company I've never heard before, I'm probably going to look and see if there's reviews of it. And it doesn't mean that I'm trying to watch hours of reviews. It's because I want to make sure that it's worth my time and money to put towards it because I hate buying something that I don't like. I
Right.
really don't like it. And I know some people, oh, new cell phone, don't care. I'm going to go get it. And they don't even think about it. For me, I'm like, if my cell phone works, then why am I going to get another one?
Yeah, I'm like that as well. But my mother-in-law is like every year she buys the new iPhone model that is released. She keeps switching the phone every year, and I'm like, I don't even know the model of iPhone I have. It's like an older one. It's like it still makes calls. I can still hear people. I can still talk, and it receives messages. That's fine.
That's more like me. Like I'll remember the model, but I have no idea what. Actually, right now I have an Android, but like I don't keep up with all the new phone stuff because I have one. Like I'm done.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
like I don't pay attention to vehicles until I'm going back into the market to go buy something. I don't I don't constantly just watch and consume. Now with miniature gaming, I try to have a wider net that's kind of like always going because why? Well, I'm a developer, so I'm trying to pay attention to what's going on in the industry.
yeah.
But with like Kickstarter, I'm kind of on the fence of just as a backer, like not really wanting to do it anymore because you get burned. I know that people expect to get burned with Kickstarter. I know that's the
I don't
motto.
I don't know if do you think they expect because Kickstarter has
I
evolved to almost a pre-order mentality for a while now.
or bigger companies.
Yeah.
But when it comes to somebody brand new, I think the idea well, I know 100%. I've seen so many people say it nothing on Kickstarter ever happens when they say it's going to.
Yeah.
Like there's just always expect there's going to be delays. Always expect it's going to be late. Always expect, longer time.
And
And I'm
and
like, as a consumer, I'm like, that sucks. I don't want that. Like, if you said you're going to do it, like, if I understand if something like when the virus was going around and it caused delays for distribution, that's
yeah.
not on anybody's fault. Nobody could plan for that. I'm not upset for that. But if you didn't know you had your artist locked down and now all of a sudden, well, we don't have a modeler, so we can't really move forward. What do you mean?
Yeah.
You figure it out. You can't wait a year extra while you slowly go through Fiverr. Like you need to resolve this.
And the Kickstarters that do fulfill on time, it's because either they already had the stuff done and they're just using Kickstarter to get that quick influx of cash, using it as a glorified pre-order because they had already done it, or basically they already have a lot of experience from previous Kickstarters. But it does raise the question of if you've done Kickstarters before and they were really successful, what are you doing still using Kickstarter?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
No,
I
yeah.
understand the business side of it. I saw gaming companies in specifically, like there were a video game company. They kept doing Kickstarters of the sequels and the next game and the next game, and I'm like, you did millions of dollars on the previous game. Why are you coming to Kickstarter to finance the next game? You don't need it. They're just doing it because it's easy, risk-free money, right? They don't need to pay out of their pocket to develop the sequel and then putting it out and hoping it sells. So obviously, being a business minded person, I understand that side, but it makes it really hard for the people that really actually do need money mostly like individual artists or individual developers or really small indie developers. They actually don't have the money to the upfront to develop the entire game. They need it, and they're competing with a company that has like four published games and has multiple million plus dollar campaigns. And it's like, what are you doing on Kickstarter? But I do
Yeah.
understand both sides.
Well, I understand the business side to an extent, but I also don't understand it because, but and I have a different business model than probably most other developers.
Yeah.
I want to sell through my website directly to the consumer, and mainly because I look at how am I going to sell in local game stores, and I'm like that just seems like I don't want to deal with distribution of like if there were individual stores that wanted to contact me and say, hey, we would love to sell Revelation Skirmish, right? We want to sell your game in our store, we love it, we believe in it, we want to move forward with having physical product here on site all the time so that someone can buy it, then we would stretch and grow into that direction. But I see the future of miniature gaming changing to be a lot more of developer directly dealing with the consumer. So I want to be in that position to build not only the trust from the consumer that White Light Media will deliver, but on top of that, I need them to be used to coming to my store, shoprevelations.com, so that they come to the store to buy because then they know which website to go to. So if I keep sending them to Kickstarter, they're used to looking for me on Kickstarter. They're not used to, and then I only get the sales from Kickstarter or the backing, the funds from Kickstarter, whenever I do a campaign, and that's it. So if I did one once a year or every other year, that's my major influx of funds. But if I have somebody getting used to going to my website and buying from me, I'm getting, in theory, residual purchases from that one individual, and then hopefully it snowballs into others, and then before you know it, you have a pretty consistent stream of sales to grow teams and grow everything else that you need to. But if they only get used to finding you in one place that's not even yours and you don't control it and they could just kick you off their platform, then it doesn't feel like it doesn't really feel like growing business as much as kind of just I don't know, looking for like the easiest way to make money, but it's not really a sustainable forward path.
It's
It's just
it's
kind of a quick catch.
it's a different business model, right? But uh, as you know, my business model at the moment is Patreon backed. So it's patronage. It's people paying like a monthly subscription to support me for all
Right.
the stuff I put out. Um, I don't know if that is actually the model I will be using like the entire time for Blackstar going forward. I've talked about several times about wanting Blackstar to be like a sort of subscription service, but I've been really looking at the entire market and what other companies are doing, and I'm not sure if people are exactly ready for that. Um, Obviously, Games Workshop now has a sub, but they use it for mostly multimedia stuff, and I don't have that, so I'm not sure. I can also see I can see the appeal from the Kickstarter, not just from the money side, because I'm thinking about maybe doing like a crowdfunding campaign for Blackstar just to raise the profile of the game, just to get the game out there in more eyes, because there are gamers and people interested in board games and tabletop games and that stuff that again go visit Kickstarter looking for stuff to pledge on, again like a almost like a pre-order system. Oh, let's see what cool games are up for pre-order on Kickstarter, so it does help you raise the profile of your game. But of course, even though I'm funding the game through Patreon, it's still not obviously enough to like to have a lot of stuff I want. So if I end up doing that crowdfunding campaign for Blackstar, it's because I actually need the money to develop the game, or to improve the game, or to give it a higher quality that I would wish it to have, to make that extra jump forward, and to basically try to have a higher profile. But again, imagine if some crazy thing happens and I earn like half a million or $1 million dollars from Kickstarter. I'm not gonna do a second Kickstarter campaign. I mean, I don't need it. And at that point, I would prefer to be in total control of my product instead of going to Kickstarter and having to prepare lots of stuff, or being on the whims of keeping those deadlines and if people actually fulfill their pledge and logistics. Imagine if another pandemic happens and I promised lots of stuff on Kickstarter, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would be a nightmare.
Yeah, and and I guess in part my view of Kickstarter is because I've tried 4 campaigns and 2 of them were successful.
Yeah,
So, and those two, the one of those 2 that was successful, the files were already ready. It was to help get a jump on newer stuff that I needed. So that was something where the file, like I was able to fulfill the files within a month.
right.
So it was very easy because it was done. So in a way, it was like a pre-order, right? There was no waiting. It was only digital products that were going to be available pretty much right away. And I had my own headaches of fulfillment, not because of me, but because of getting the backers to finalize their orders and finalize all of their other details. And it's not I'm
Even
not
digitally, right?
yeah, right. Even to make sure, like if they wanted to, because the only physical things I was going to allow in the campaign is if they wanted to buy tokens to be able to play the game, tokens and the order cards,
Right.
and trying to get those people to finalize that, or if I had people contact me months and months and months later saying, "Hey, I never got the files," and like, yeah, you did. I emailed it. I sent out numerous updates. I've done everything I can. You know, you didn't download it, so I'll help them out. But I mean, I can't imagine doing that on a scale of $1 million and having several thousand backers and trying to wrangle all of it. It is a lot like herding cats, except cats around the world.
It probably becomes like, to fulfill all that stuff. It becomes a full time job. You need a
Yeah,
person dedicated for that, and either you are doing it, but then you're not working on developing the game, or you actually
right,
have to pay someone to do it.
right. Which is fine if you make
Yeah,
enough to make it worth
and
it.
if you plan
Can't,
for that,
yes, but I don't know. It's probably in part because of how I am as a consumer that I don't really think that most other people, because I'm filtering it through myself, right?
right?
So then thinking, well, I don't like Kickstarter. Why would these other people like Kickstarter? And I see benefits to Kickstarter. I do, but I I don't like the idea of becoming dependent on a platform that could tomorrow say, we're going to take 10% of what you've raised just off the top. Like they could just make that announcement and that's it. You have to just suck it up and deal with it. And, or they make some other policies of whatever. And any platform can do that at any time. And we understand that as developers and creators that we have to kind of flow with things. But as a person, I don't like that. So I try to safeguard that by controlling more of it
Yeah,
to mitigate that.
I get that. That doesn't that concerns me, but at the moment I'm actually in that situation, right? If I don't know if Patreon decides to raise, the next month we're gonna start charging 50% of your subs, and I'm like, what? Obviously, I'm at the mercy of Patreon in that regard as well. Um, it's always a risk, right? But I'm thinking about obviously I've announced, in case you don't know, everyone. I've announced the roadmap for the development of Blackstar going forward until release, and the plan is actually to make like a crowdfunding campaign at the end. But because, again, the Patreon doesn't really pay for everything that I want to be in there, and especially like a lot of the card art, and there's a lot of different mech elements. So the Patreon sub effectively is giving you early access to stuff, and in exchange you're supporting and giving me money so that I can develop a lot of the stuff that I want to then fully flesh out with a successful crowdfunding campaign. So it's not gonna be the case that the if I make the crowdfunding campaign, it will be with everything that is 100% ready and it's already done and it's quote unquote, like I said, easy money or risk free money. It's because I actually will need that money to complete the game and flesh out more art and do more elements and basically bring the game to a level that is the level that I envision for it, you know. And that includes, it will still be heavily digital because that's the business model that I've pursued, but it will be a way also to produce a few physical items that I think are really cool, including one specific one that again I announced, but going out to more people, I can say here that during I've dubbed this period from May from now until March 2023 the season 0 of Blackstar. It's called Vanguard Nights. I'm structuring Blackstar to be seasonal content. Obviously, like a lot of games do these days, like a lot of video games like Fortnite, for example. And each season will have its own content and its own storyline themes and exclusive items for that season. So this season 0 is basically the pre-season or the early access development season. And to everyone that is a super supporter on Patreon and supports the Kickstarter, or in other words, someone that keeps an active sub on Patreon from May to March and pledges to the crowdfunding campaign, I will have an exclusive physical miniature kit called the Vanguard. It's a mech, the Vanguard mech, that will be exclusive for these people. It will include its own cards to play with, so it will have its own power set and its own abilities and features, its own unique Vanguard Knight pilot, and it has an interesting perk. It's the only unit in the game that can play for any faction. So in Blackstar, you select a mech, and the mech includes some cards unique to the mech, and a pilot that includes some abilities unique to that pilot, and they belong to a faction. And that faction has a small card deck of cards that are unique to that faction. So this mech is the only mech in the game where you can use this mech in any other faction. So you can combine this mech's cards and pilot abilities with any other faction's card deck. While all the other mechs in the game, you will have to use that specific mech with that specific faction. And this will be an exclusive item, physical only. So this won't be digitally available to buy after the campaign or anything like that. It will be physical only. I will fulfill it, print all of them out together with selected exclusive partners across the globe, so you don't pay extra shipping, because I will get a quality partner to print these in the US, for example. And I'm also looking to have stuff like a really cool quality hardback source book of the Blackstar universe to be available for the crowdfunding campaign. So I'm thinking about a few physical items, but not that many. Again, not to eat all the money. Another mistake people make, they offer too many physical rewards and then that eats up all the profit
Right.
and and costs too much as well. Obviously, I understand the exclusivity. People can look at it in a cold way, say, oh, you're trying to like get more money or anything. I just mainly because it will end up basically costing me money or breaking even on the people that actually are eligible for that. I won't really be making money off them. I just wanted to give some a really cool gift, a really cool perk to people that really are massive supporters of the game and massive supporters of me on Patreon, you know. But obviously, I understand having like such an exclusive item is not to everyone's tastes, so to speak.
It's very difficult to make something that works for everybody. I have not
Yeah,
figured out how to do it yet.
yeah. So again, my mentality is I want to make something really cool for people that were really cool to me, you know. So obviously, I mean, I know there will be other people that will be really disappointed or angry that they won't have access to this, or they will say, "Oh, someone will sell it on eBay and it will be really expensive or something." I just want to make something cool for someone, you know. So and you can't please anyone, everyone. So that's the thing that I will do, and I'm excited. I'm excited about that and about making a really cool mech, a really cool miniature that will be really useful for the game, and it will have the faction flexibility to go around, which is the only mech that will be able to do that. I always keep coming back to MechWarrior Dark Age, and I don't remember if it was one of the first tournaments, but one of the first limited edition miniatures they had was the Mad Cat 3, the Mason Dunn um, pilot, and um, in case people are listening to this and don't know, MechWarrior Dark Age had official tournaments, and in every official tournament, the top prizes were limited edition miniatures. So this was a Mad Cat 3 that you couldn't get in the booster packs or anywhere else. You had to win the tournament, and it not only did the miniature look awesome, it was one of the best mechs in the entire game. And I still remember how amazing it was to be able to have to win that and have that exclusive figure. Obviously, I have it without having won the tournament because over the years I ended up like having one from one of my friends. But for a long time, it was probably the most sought after like MechWarrior Dark Age miniature. Some people obviously were like, "Oh, this is so rare or so expensive," but again, you need to have some of this really cool rare stuff in order for other things to be more normal. If everything is rare, nothing is rare. If everything is super powerful, then nothing is super powerful because everything is at the same power. And we've talked about this before, right? And I even told you how companies purposefully make some units be total crap in game in order for other units to be really powerful. And they know full well that no one will play with them. Card games do this all the time, for example.
Yeah.
It's you might think it's a really strange philosophy, but again, if a this card has 3 attack, this card has 12 attack. Oh, that 12 attack card is awesome, but if all cards have 12 attack, none of them are awesome because they all have 12 attack and everyone is the same.
And no one wants to buy boosters of like 3 cards each.
Yeah.
So, or they don't want to pay $10 a booster pack so that everything's good. You know, like it ends like if you try to mess with that scale in any direction, I don't think people would be happy.
Obviously, the way I'm trying to approach that for Blackstar, I don't want to have crap max, but I will try to have more asymmetrical gameplay so that some gear, some equipment, some abilities are really useful in some situations but not others, and some X will have very different playstyles compared to others. And that's the way I will try to solve that problem because I don't have a lot of units and I don't have a lot of resources, so I don't see the point in spending money, time, and a lot of effort to make like an entire mech kit with its own uh, card deck and the pilot and the faction and all that just to be crap. I will try
Well,
to
yeah.
So, but it's a more difficult problem to solve than it appears at first glance. Actually, you know,
Yeah.
again, Blackstar has very few units. And brings me back to a question that Marcus asked the other day on Discord, and I sort of gave like a quick reply, but I can go more in depth on it right now. He asked why I didn't go to design a game with big battles with massive armies, why I went with 1v1 battles and 2v2 battles. It was several different things. Number one, I wanted like big awesome mech miniatures, and when you have like a mech miniature that is like 3 centimeters tall or something like that, the size of a space marine, that doesn't really sell the awesomeness to me. That just looks like, I don't know, a soldier miniature or something. I wanted to have big awesome mech miniatures. I wanted them to be fully customizable, so that requires them to be a certain size in order for you to print out and swap parts and have sufficiently resistant parts and good connectors between the parts, good fixation points and good joints and all that stuff. So it needs to be a certain size. I wanted to reduce the clutter on the table, so the game is really focused on those few units that are on the table. They will look awesome, and you will have scenery, but it's just those guys and not like 40 Tyranids on the table or something like that. And basically the massive graveyard of army games on Kickstarter. Everyone tries to make an army game like Warhammer 40k, and 99.9% of them fail. Some of them are even successfully crowdfunded, but then they take so long to fulfill the campaign. Any interest and any excitement has already died when they finally fulfill the campaign 3 years later, or they
Yeah.
never, or they are still working on it, or they never fulfill it in the first place and they run out of money, or they never fulfill it in the first place and they run away with money to the Bahamas or something like that, or everything goes correctly and the game is crap and people go back to playing 40k anyway. So I looked at the market and I saw, is there any like specific like mech miniatures game that is has like actual super detailed mech kits, customizable mech kits, and it's more focused on short battles where it's 1v1 or 2v2, or a grand melee of just very few units, like 6 units or 8 units, and it's more focused on this metaphor of medieval tournaments and pitting knights against knights. Is there any game like that? The answer was no. So, is there any game where you have like 50 space marine style soldiers fighting against 80 alien style creatures? There's lots of other games like that. So that's not what I was gonna do. And plus I'm all about the mechs, you know. Even all those years playing BattleTech, I never gave a crap about tanks and hovercrafts and aerospace fighters and VTOLs and all that stuff. I just I just like the mechs.
You speak heresy.
Yeah, I just speak heresy. I'm all about the mechs, man. Mechs stomping on the battlefield. Give me the Karinskis against the Sierras.
I look forward to that fight.
Oh yeah,
But yeah, I mean, it's just preference, and
yeah.
the it's I don't know. With Kickstarter, it just depends a lot, and I think what we're seeing is that the consumers have kind of spoken and they support the projects that are from the bigger companies because the campaigns look nicer, the video material that's promotional looks nicer, the models look nicer, everything's flashier and better.
And
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 when,
it,
as a consumer, if I'm going to spend $100 either way, right? If
yeah.
I'm going to spend $100 backing this guy who's designing something that all he has is hand drawn art, or I'm going to look over here at $100 with this super polished package. Which one's going to get the $100? Probably more than likely it's going to be the second guy or the second operation. It just bang for your buck. It's just different. Some people go out of their way, just kind of like they go to farmers markets or they go to other indie events. They look for someone smaller to support.
Yeah.
They look for that because they're like, oh, stand against the big corporation. So they look for the little guy to help, which is great when you're the little guy and you're the developer on that side. But then the majority of consumers want what they want and they don't care who makes it. And so when you're fighting that, it's really difficult to go up against Games Workshop and all these other big players because they are way flashier.
And not only
It's
that,
just
we're all consumers, right? Are you gonna spend $100 on this new brand you never heard of from someone you never heard of, or are you gonna spend $100 on that brand you already know and possibly already have products that you used from them and that you actually liked? It's an uphill battle, right? Convincing someone that's again the argument when you go in Hollywood, like new IPs again versus rebooting old IPs, because then even if they change the entire contents, most of the time they prefer to use an old IP because people already heard of it.
mm-hmm. Yeah, which is as someone who creates things, it's a very silly way of doing things because you want people to like the things that you're making,
Yeah.
or at least to give you a chance. You don't have to like Revelations. I just want you to taste it. I just want you to try it, right? I just want you to look into it past scrolling through Instagram. But recognizing that I'm fighting every single other big developer and their monster presence
But again,
to get eyes.
going back into non-heretical territory, you have something, or rather two things that most of these people that are trying to sell like Kickstarter Warhammer clones don't have. First, you have a fleshed out universe with already several novels, and you have a deep, much deeper lore compared to some of them. Some of them don't even have lore. It's like they're just trying to sell you a Warhammer 40k clone where they change two or three little things. And
Yeah,
and
it's like enough to justify why the aliens are here.
yeah, it looks slightly different, and the aliens are invading. Why are they invading? Because they like stomach acids and they needed to live. That's the lore. Um, and the other is you have a constant presence and interaction with your fans, because I've seen a lot of these Kickstarter campaigns again. Some of these even succeed, but then there's nothing. You don't really hear news about the development. They don't interact with their fans. They don't put out updates. They don't have like developing lore that keeps coming out. Nothing. It's just we crowdfunded this tabletop army game. It looks slightly different from the others. It was a success, and now we're gonna spend 2 or 3 years developing it, and we're gonna barely have a presence on the internet while we do it. And it's like that your game just died. And
Yeah.
and those are the strengths that Revelations has. Shop revelations.com.
Thank you.
Patreon.com/Polygon Massworks.
Yeah.
Again, that's why I'm deeply thankful for all the people that have supported me on Patreon and continue to support me on Patreon, and with words, with encouragement, and with just interest in the stuff that I like to do, and enable me to have this dream of making Blackstar.
Yeah. And with it was kind of echoing something you were mentioning earlier. Like you really wanted to design Blackstar to be this thing that you really wanted.
Yeah.
Right. And that was my same process for Revelation Skirmish, being like, I've played so many games over the years. I haven't found anything that does what I want to do 100%. They've gotten close-ish, or they've done it just in a totally different direction, but concept wise, it was very similar. And it's just like, I can make something, and finally moving forward with that. But then, like with the lore, I have chosen to do things that some people might think is kind of mature
Mm.
topics and stuff. And there's other stuff that I want to get into. And it's because that's how I am. So I like that kind of, I don't like, there's a place for lore that's kind of just like super, super skin deep. But then when you kind of digest that for a little bit, you're like, but there's no why here. There's no reasons here for anything. It's just, this is just happening just to happen. So, and most, uh, in my opinion, most universes don't really explore things enough, and they kind of leave you with so many unanswered questions. And some people say, well, the unanswered questions are good because then you don't end up with the midichlorians explanation in Star Wars. And some people loathe that idea of what that actually is, but at the same time too, it's what George Lucas came up with. And this is it better to never know or to know too much? I don't know. You got to kind of walk that line.
I think
But
it depends on in that particular issue. It depends on if the entire appeal of the character in the first place was in part of the mystery, because I always come back to this. I didn't like to finally learn who Wolverine was in the comics. Uh, it was a story that they didn't need to tell. I'm not talking about how he came to have like the metal skeleton and all that. I'm talking about who actually the Wolverine's childhood and where he comes from and all that. That was a story I didn't need. It only detracted from the character. Now everyone knows everything there is to know about Wolverine, and this mysterious character that couldn't quite piece his past from his broken and fragmented memories, and there was stuff always going on in his life in the books over the decades that he didn't quite understand because he didn't know where he came from. All that is lost, and now he was just like a spoiled brat that grew claws one day and ran away from home. It's again, it's dumb. Um, and obviously, I mean, there are stories to tell and stories to tell, basically, and some stories don't need to be told. It really depends on what you're shooting for, right?
right, yeah, and on certain things, when it gets to the creative process with stuff, you don't always know what's going to end up landing.
Yeah,
You can think, well, I've done this so many times. I think people really like it. I want to go a little further, and then you're like, oh, I went too far. Um, and I haven't had that reality check yet on anything that I've done because we're still, you can do this for several years and you can have people buying your stuff and enjoying it and consuming it and wanting more, but you still haven't had a flood of stuff for people to be like, I really like all of this, and this thing over here is like, eh. Um, and then
yeah.
getting actual quality feedback. Someone just saying, well, why didn't you like it? I just didn't. Okay, well, that doesn't help. What am I going to walk away with from that? And that happens more often than I care to acknowledge because it's yeah, it's I think I've talked about it before, the frustration
Yeah,
on social media of making posts and asking questions and people just like the image. You're like, you bastard, you're supposed to respond. I don't want to like, I want to answer. I'm trying to make things better.
yeah. That's why it's useful. I just posted a Patreon poll yesterday specifically to ask everyone what's some things they wanted to see, what
Yeah.
extra materials and extra stuff they wanted to see me talk about and explain about Blackstar, because I get likes and I get people liking the mech designs and all that, interested in Blackstar, but okay, more feedback than that. Nothing. Okay, so I'm just gonna make a poll where people just have to click it, and people, the polls work. They actually click on that stuff,
Yes. Yeah.
so it's really useful in that sense.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of polls for getting information and data. Um, that was actually how we started our very first episode here.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I remember going back to like the first year of the Patreon. The polls were the most popular posts, even more than the downloads. People were like, "Give me more polls, give me more polls." I was actually planning to rename myself Polion Masterworks. Nyak nyak, bad joke.
Uh,
Wah wah. Oh man. So, Rick, is there like anything that you want to talk about, or should we call it a day for this episode?
um, no, I think I'm good because I tend to make things go too long, so I
Right,
think I'm
but
good right now.
okay, but not as long as shop.revelations.com and
Yeah.
patreon.com/Polygon Masterworks.
Yeah.
Let's chill this. All right, everyone. So again, I'm João, and I've been here with Rick, and we'll see everyone on the next episode. Thank you for listening, and take care.
See you guys.